Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the first of our Path to College events this semester. My name is Natalie Gallagher. I'm president of Applerouth, and just really excited to present tonight again with James Foreman. We did a similar event for this class in the fall, and now we're doing it here at the end of the school year in the spring. James is the current director of admissions and enrollment management at the Galloway School. He was a upper school principal before that and has a long history of education leadership and has been steering kids in the right direction for a long time. So we're just really excited to have you again, James. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share some of the, I don't even want to say wisdom. I want to say some of the things that have worked through the partnerships that have been successful with parents over the years, because this is nothing of my own. This is everything that has worked through the partnership with families over the 17 years I've worked in educational administration in independent schools.
Awesome. Well, just to orient you guys and make sure that you know where we are, this is the first stop on our Path to College events that are going on this May. So this is specifically for the class of 2026. So our rising sophomores, current freshmen. Next week, we'll have the class of 2025, laying the groundwork for college applications. And then the week after that, executing your college bound plans. So that's for the current juniors, rising seniors. So if you have an older student and you want to get registered for those, you can do so at applerouth.com/path to college. And, you know, at Applerouth, we do this work because we think that if you can change a student's self-beliefs, you can change their lives, and that changing those self-beliefs comes through building skills, mastery experiences, challenging self-talk that might be going on. And so it's just like so exciting to be able to come and present with people like James, who are going to talk to us about how to do that. You know, we do academic tutoring, test prep, executive function coaching, if that's something that's interesting to you. But we also just like to do these webinars as a free service to the community and make sure that we're getting good information out there to folks. So this is where we're going tonight. We actually are apparently going to do the poll a little bit later to tell you, like, we just want to know who's here. We want to know, you know, who's taking in the information. James is going to share his top 9 tips for 9th graders. And as the current parent of a 9th grader, I am excited to learn with the rest of you. And then I'll make sure that you know about the testing timelines for high stakes testing. So SAT, ACT, not because you need to do anything now, but because if we don't address it now, then you're either going to start doing it before you need to, or you're going to worry about it or wonder. So we'll just make sure that you know what's coming in the future years so that you don't wonder. And then we're hoping to have a lot of time for your questions. For those of you who submitted questions ahead of time, thank you. I've got those here. I will pose them to James. And for those of you who want to ask questions, there's a Q&A box in the bottom. At any time tonight, feel free to put your question in that Q&A box. I cannot promise that we will get to all of them, and I will probably anonymize your question in some way, so it may sound like your question, but not exactly your question. But we will get to as many of them as we can in the next 56 minutes. So, all right, James, your top 9 for the 9th grade.
Well, Natalie, I am extremely grateful for this opportunity, and to the Applerouth community, excuse me. Thank you so much for the time. And you know, if any of these tips are useful, I'm hopeful that it will be beneficial to your transition. You know, here's the thing. I just want, let's go through an exercise, everyone together. Let's take a deep breath. And then we'll exhale together. Because one of the things that you'll see that's in the slide that I'll represent is that this is not your journey. This is your child's journey. Right. So we'll get started with one of our tips. And here's the thing. I've been on each side of this. I've been a middle school principal. I've been a high school principal. I've been a 9th grade dean of students. I've been a 7th and 8th grade, 5th and 6th grade dean of students. So there's no one side of the transition into high schools that I have not been a part of. A lot of these tips, yes, are from my personal experience, but I can liken them to those who are not attending an independent school. Some of the things should be transient no matter what environment that your kiddo is transitioning into. So like I said, I'm hopeful that this will be beneficial to you in some way, shape, and form. If not all 9 of them, at least you're able to walk away with one. So we'll get started.
All right, here we go.
So the number one tip I have for you, and parents, this might seem a bit cliche. Let your kiddo enjoy the summer. Don't overprogram. Now, what this does not mean is to erode any level of responsibility for your kiddo. No, there should be some boundaries. There should be some level of responsibility throughout the summer. Something that, and you'll see this a bit later where I talk about routines, something that a kiddo has to wake up and attend to. There's a level of expectation, right? There's a beginning, there's an outcome to the start and to the end of their day. So, but don't overprogram your kid where every hour of the day feels like something that is similar to the school year. You want to give a level of breathing room to the school year into the summer. So do not overprogram. And we'll come back to that in a different iteration as well. Encourage engagement early and often. And this references the school year. So for your ninth grader, when you talk about this summer, when you're on your vacations and when you're sitting there driving and talking about what's to come of the ninth grade year, think about the clubs, think about the activities, think about the extracurriculars that your school provides, and talk to them about their passions, some of the things that might exist outside of math, English, science, social studies, world language, right? Something that they can gravitate to. One of the things that, and this is not a plug to the Galloway School by any means, but one of the things that I absolutely love about our school community is that a kiddo can hang their hat in a variety of places to experience success, right? So go on that website, families, and look at the clubs, look at the activities, look at the different things that your kiddo can get involved with that exist outside or even within the school day, because some things exist in that lunch period depending upon how a schedule works for your kiddo and for their school environment. You know, like I said, I'm not trying to get on the soapbox about my school community, but I do want to share some things. So one of the things I love about educational involvement, Alexander Aston actually has a theory, and it typically applies to higher education. It's the theory of involvement. It says that the variety of places that a student has to hang their hat to experience success has a direct correlation to not only how they feel about their school community, but about their academic performance. So that's where I come from with number two, not to get, too far down a rabbit hole or on a soapbox by any means, but really find some things where your kiddo can hang their hat in additional places. Formalize and agreed upon workspace, okay, at home. This is something you want to talk about, you want to allow voice to. Listen, voice and choice is something that your teenager needs and wants, not just at school, but at home as well, right? You also want to be able to partner in the learning environment. I know that sounds completely different than how parenting has operated for you, through these early grade school ages. But this is more of a partnership. Yes, you do hold the cards, for lack of better words. But at the same time, you want your kiddo to understand that this is a partnership. Back in the old days, and I'm going to date myself. Back in the old days, my mother used to sit across from me, and it was the dining room table back then. Well, not the main dining room table, but the one that we ate on, right? And we sat at the dining room table to do homework, and she would have her Franklin planner out, right? If anybody remembers the old Franklin planners back in the day, as she would schedule out her week, I was scheduling out my week. Right? It was a partnership. This is what we do to become successful, excuse me. So and it's a conversation, right? This is what mom does. This is what dad does. This is what we do in order to be successful. I want you to see what we do, right? And let's partner in this. So find find an environment that's an agreed upon space where you're able to not only put eyes on the kiddo and what they're doing, but also they're able to put eyes on you, just as important. Establish routines. I told you we would be coming back to this. This is morning and evenings, and this goes back to number one, right? Let them enjoy their summer, but that's not without a potential, depending upon your kiddo, a volunteer opportunity, a summer job that extends from something that you do within your occupation or within your profession, something that they wake up for. There's a level of expectation, there is outcomes, and there's ways for them to develop skills as well. right? And it's not just based upon them. We'll get to that because I know you're already looking at number 9, parents. I know you're already looking at number 9, but it's not just based upon summer work. Okay. This is based upon something that is tangible, might be passion purpose, might be service purpose, might be activity based, but it's something that they wake up for and have established routine for. That's going to be something that you're going to hope that they have and carry with them throughout and beyond, as you can imagine. Bookmark the homework website for oversight. Now, all of the kiddos who I absolutely love and I've supported over the years are cringing right now if they heard me tell you this as a bit of a sneak peek. But yes, okay. In certain school environments like ours, it's very unique that parents do not have the login in high school to their kiddos' Canvas page. It's something that their kiddos have to. Canvas is the learning management system that is used for our kiddos. It's different in different schools, but it's unique in our environment and it's been unique in the different places that I've worked. But you should have in most schools access to your kiddos' login information. And this also is a part of that conversation that I referenced previously about a workplace. This isn't about mom, dad, parents, eavesdropping, for lack of better words, on the kiddo's environment or into their work. This is about giving you an additional safety net. And you'll see this when I talk about creating points of contact within the school. This is literally engaging with your kiddo about the partnership of learning, in that there's certain safety nets that are in place as they become an independent learner. Right. And establishing that you're almost there, kiddo, right? And giving them the accolades that are just due and giving them the growth points that are just due as well. None of us are finished versions of ourselves, even as adults. So that's a conversation point for your kiddos. During the summertime, like I said, this is while you're on the beach. This is during some of those relaxed environments. This is during the car ride to the beach, right? These are during the times where it's low stakes, high reward, as I like to say. Organization is key, right? And this is a bit of the freedom, choice, and freedom that comes with your kiddo. What works best for you? Excuse me, getting a bit tongue-tied. What worked during middle school, right? What did we see that was successful? And let's be real with this, James, right? That's the conversation now. Let's be real, James. I remember my mother saying that. Like, look, the colored binders really didn't work well for you, nor did the Trapper Keeper. So what are we going to do for you? Right. And that's the conversation you're having. Google Tabs have been absolutely phenomenal for some kids, as if their executive functioning is to a level where they can organize that, and they're utilizing, technology to that extent. The paper planner, tried and true. Our kiddos are still using it within our upper learning community. Upper learning is our high school within our community. Google folders, if they are using technology, and the tabs are something that is just too much to manage, honestly. 42 years old, tabs are too much to manage. I have folders within the drive. So it's whatever they have become most comfortable with and what is most useful for them. But it's their ownership, right? This is the conversation. This is what I'm going to look at when we check in, right, on Sundays. And this is what I referenced in one of our talks before, Natalie, about those check-in points. And it's not on the screen, my apologies, of, those Sundays and Wednesdays of check-in points of, hey, where are we? Where are you with your classwork? Where are you with your quizzes? Where are you with your assessments? Where are you with your makeup work? Where are you with planning for the week ahead? Right? And just checking points. And you're doing that same thing transparently. You're showing them your schedule. Like, look, I have all this going on in my day. Jennifer and I, even though we're puppy parents, we do that with one another as she's developing, because she's in a different level of organization and profession that she's been in before, right? She's in the medical field now, and the salon field was drastically different. So as I organize my schedule, we're talking to one another very transparently, like, hey, what does that look like for you? How do you budget this? How do you do that time? So like I said, there'll be time for questions, so I don't want to get on the soapbox or erode time. Number 7, create a point of contact within your school community. In independent schools, this could be your advisor. It should be your advisor, frankly, not to judge any independent school community, but that should be one of your points of contact within an independent school community. This could be a teacher. one of your kiddo's favorite teachers, or somebody whom through the parent teacher conferences that you have hit it off with and struck a rapport with, that's able to have a great touch point for your kiddo. This could be a coach if your student's a student athlete, or this could be even within the arts, but that would assume to be a teacher, someone within the arts that has a connection with extracurricular teacher that has a connection with your kiddo. You want to have somebody who not only has a pulse on your kiddo's day-to-day, but also a pulse on the other classes that are taking place, and can transparently talk to those teachers to find out what might be showing up in different places and spaces. So if that system isn't in place, I would inquire about what they do to ensure that there's a pulse on your kiddo within the different classes: math, English, science, social studies, world language, and all those electives, to ensure that there's a through line and somebody has a pulse on your kiddo's day-to-day experience. I know this might sound condescending, especially as I just affirmed to you that I'm a puppy parent. You're like, wait, okay, come on now, Foreman. You never had any of your own. My nephew, who just recently graduated, I can't tell you that I did not ride the roller coaster from time to time. I think a bit of distance, as he was growing up in Baltimore, allowed for me not to. But this is something I encourage all families, and it's tough, which is why that touch point for you is so beneficial as well. Somebody to talk you off the ledge, somebody who you can vent to, right? But don't ride the roller coaster, especially of this year. Don't ride it, right? There's going to be peaks, there's going to be valleys, there's going to be social ups and downs, there's going to be academic struggles, there's going to be academic successes. And you want to be there for all of it as a cheerleader, not as a participant. You've lived this life, right? This is your kiddo's journey. So you want to be there through the tough times to be able to support with a hug, not with emotion. You want to be there through the celebratory times to actively participate, right? So I think that speaks for itself, but it's easier said than done. But just use that as a mantra for yourself as, the ninth grade year takes place. And the last thing, which I know you're so happy to see, complete summer work. It is important. Even when I was in school 20 plus years, or even longer than that, long ago for high school, I used to think it was so unimportant. It's something I used to tell all of my families through this entire journey of my work in administration and to students. The summer work is important. It's the cyclical value of the work that happens in the sequential subjects like a mathematics, which is some of the work that comes home. And the reading is something that will pick up right where they have left off, right? And it allows for their mind to stretch in different spaces and places. Not every kiddo is beneficial to be able to go on a summer vacation. Their imagination is something that can be stretched within a book. Not every kiddo is able to express themselves within their families. That's something that they can find within their summer reading, right? There's many different avenues and outlets to a kiddo really engaging in the intentional summer reading that's been provided for them. And the math work is something that they need just to continue to keep those wheels turning. So, like I said, I don't know if all 9 are beneficial to you, your family, and your kiddos transition to ninth grade. But what I've come to find is that each one of these 9 things have benefited many of the students that I've worked with over the 17 years in the variety of capacities that I've worked in. Truly, Natalie, thank you for this time. To Applerouth community, thank you for your time. And I'm ready for questions if there are any that are out there.
This is great, James. And I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure our webinar participants have a lot of questions, so we will do that. I want to make sure that let's real quickly make sure that you guys know testing timelines, and then we'll open up to Q&A, because I promised I would talk you all off the ledges. As the parent of a 9th grader myself, I promise you, there's no secret. I've been working in test prep for like 20 years off and on. And my kid is not doing test prep this summer, right? There's no secret sauce that we're like, ooh, we'll get a head start on everybody else. And then a year from now, like, no. So this is the timeline. It's just so that you know it and can file it away, and you can hear it again before you need it. But I want to make sure that those of you with freshmen, do not you let your kids do summer reading this summer and maybe some summer math homework that's assigned, but not summer test prep too early. So these kids a year from now, so they might, depending on what school they're in and specific characteristics, they might take the PSAT in the fall. If they do, as sophomores, it is just practice. It'll be the first time that the test is fully digital. They'll get a sense of what that's like, how they like the digital test, but it is just practice. Then next year about this time, so when we're talking to the sophomores, rising juniors in a week, we'll be saying a different thing, right? Those kids might want to start picking a test and setting a goal and deciding their timeline. And it's going to look a lot different for each kid, depending on if they do fall sports or spring sports, depending on if they've finished Algebra 2. Most the SAT and ACT are going to go through Algebra 2. So you want to kind of have that under your belt before you do most of your prep. So next year, summer of sophomore year, a lot of kids are going to want to pick a test and set a goal, and then select their test dates, heading into junior year, kind of figure out what your timeline looks like and your plan, because that's going to let you then figure out when you need to get ready. And then really for a lot of kids, they're going to take their first official test in the fall or spring of junior year. So junior year is for most kids like the time to do test prep, and then leading into fall of senior year, you've got a little bit of extra time there if you're still trying to get that final score or whatever to get the scholarship, or just bring up your score. But this is not the season. This is not the summer. So just wanted you to know what was the summer so that you don't have to be anxious about it now. All right, so we are gonna let's go back to your top 9, because I think this is a good screen to be looking at as we talk questions. Although actually maybe I'll stop sharing and let you, that way people can see your faces better, see your face more. So we had some pre-questions submitted, so I want to go ahead and ask them because I think they relate really well to your top 9. So you talked about making sure that your kids have time to enjoy the summer and that you're not over programming. There's a lot of anxiety about how schools are going to view something like a summer job if it's not a job that's a passion job. If it's like, hey, I got that first job at Publix, or I got that job working at Chick-fil-A or whatever. Is that going to ding them when it comes time for college?
It's ironic you say that, because I do have a kiddo who asked me that very question just the other day, and she's actually going to be working with me as an admissions intern as next year. No, they want to see the level of responsibility and commitment. It's speaking to the why, right? It's the why behind it. So I could leave it like that, or I continue to come up with different anecdotes, but truly, no, it doesn't matter the level of responsibility, right? It's about a kiddo being able to be seen establishing routines, seeing through commitment, right? Having accountability. It's all the why pieces to it. It's not the what.
Awesome. Thank you. And so speaking also, you mentioned the roller coaster and not riding the roller coaster. What about parents who, like if we have somebody sitting here tonight who's like, oh my gosh, wow, freshman year did not go as expected. And, many of us have black and white thinking, we catastrophize, speaking for a friend, right? Like, and how do you keep yourself as a parent from saying, oh my gosh, all is ruined at this point? Like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah. And that's where I would go through some of the things that I reviewed previously, which is what were the touch points, and reestablishing those touch points, right? And thinking about, okay, not what happened, but what can be, right? As we think about next year, who have you gravitated to that was somebody to speaking to your child? Who have you gravitated to that is somebody whom you trust, somebody whom you can open up to, or at least that mom or dad, or that your parents, could reach out to as a major touch point through your school day. And then really looking through the year about where some of those points were where the kiddo did hang their hat to find success. I like to say not inventorying for pain. Right. And it depends on where things came from. So this is a very general question, and I'm not being critical of the question, but in not inventorying for pain if it's just not the academic year didn't pan out like I wanted it to be. Okay. Okay. Let's not focus on what happened. Let's focus on what we can do. Let's focus on what we can do to make things better within the next year. What were our study habits? Did we have a workspace? Did we have an established routine? Right. What are some of these things that we can improve about? As it comes to the social experience, and if this was a kiddo who, because I want to be very careful of how I respond to that, if this was a kiddo who did reach out and did branch out, Okay, what were the groups that you did reach out to, and what was that experience like, and what did you do to engage with them, and what was their reaction to you? Like trying to get to the bottom of things, and it's always healthy. And here you go, parents. I'm going to give it to you straight. It's always healthy to have your kiddo have an ability to talk to a third party that might not be somebody who is the direct parent, right? It might be auntie, it might be somebody who's a relative, it might be the counselor. As a lot of kiddos are receiving the level of support that I think is necessary in order to gain some of the skills that don't happen within certain classrooms and certain school environments. So, like I said, that piece has so many different tangents that I can go on for days, but it's
No, that's
really
great.
going back to the support system more than anything, Natalie. I'm sorry if I went too long in the tooth with that.
No, that's great. We have one question. I'll go ahead and take this one, which is how do kids prepare for the PSAT? And so again, if you have a kid who's going to take it in the fall, don't feel like they need to prepare. If they want to go in and just take it, that's completely fine. It's practice at this point. If they feel like they do want to prepare for it a little bit, I know some schools use it for placement. Some kids just get anxious if they're taking something that they don't know. A lot of people, so like, for example, Applerouth, I know in the fall, will do a series of free PSAT prep rally events. So they'll be able to take a free practice test. We do some free strategy sessions just so that when they go in, they'll know what the question formats are going to look like. They're going to know what the format of the test is. They'll be a little familiar with it, with the timing. And so they don't feel like they're going in cold. But again, if these are rising sophomores, I wouldn't do any extensive prep at all. I would just like maybe get them a little acclimated to what the test feels like. So thank you for that question. So this one was pre-submitted, and I love that a student had the guts to ask this. So I want to make sure that we make space to answer it. So a student asked, do you have advice for me as a shy student if I have a hard time wanting to get involved or asking for help?
Yes, yes. There's small points of contact. You can be a fly on the wall in the club, right? Clubs are going to be interconnected. They're going to be I was going to say interdisciplinary. They're going to be based upon passions, right? They're going to have different grade levels within it. And you can truly be a passive participant within a club environment that's small, or be an active participant in one that is big. Those are points of affinity. So I think about that. I also think about some of the classes and think about your electives. Those are places where you might want to open the door a little bit more than you have before. Everybody's there for the same exact thing, right?
Awesome.
Everybody's there for the same exact passion. So those would be two places.
Great. And any advice for a kid who has trouble asking for help?
Yeah. Advocacy is tough. So email is one of the best things that your parents and I did not have growing up, that allows for a level of advocacy that did not take place previously. So learn how to format a very appropriate email that allows for you to advocate appropriately. And when you do have an opportunity to engage with your teacher as they respond to that email and you meet, explain the why behind why you use the email as opposed to wanting to speak up in class, and take small steps to improve that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And frankly, a skill that's going to really serve you in college and then life. I so many college professors that I talk to are like, I just wish that anyone would come to office hours. Anyone, like, I just wish that they would come and ask their questions. They want to help you. You don't go into teaching if you don't want to help students. So they want to help. I guess sometimes like just the reminder that it's not scary and that they're there, they're on your side.
Natalie, as a principal, we have a late start on some Fridays, and some of those Fridays, our teachers are accessible starting at 8 o'clock as opposed to 8:30. And I would say to my students, do you really think that they just want to sit around and do absolutely nothing and eat bagels and muffins? No, they would love to engage with you. This is why they get paid. You're exactly right.
Exactly. Great. Well, this is the time of year where I know students are often signing up for their classes for next year. They're trying to figure out what to take. As a parent, I know you said it's not our journey, it's their journey, but what do you do? How do you advise parents when there seems to be a disconnect between what you as a parent think your student should take and what the counselors maybe are recommending or the teachers recommend? And that can go either direction. It can either be that you think that they're pushing the kids too hard, Or it can be that you're like, well, I don't think that you're going to challenge my kid enough, or they're not going to be in enough honors classes or AP. And we all see the statistics about getting to college, and this is really going to be a problem.
I learned some great information from the college counselors that I've worked with over the years, more importantly, the ones that I work with currently. And one of the things that they taught me was that every school environment is judged upon that school environment, not the next school or the other school or the other school that they're always compared to within the market. Right. So the level of challenge that is available to your kiddo within their school environment is what they, college counselors, college acceptances, college boards, are looking at with regards to your kiddo's progression within there. Right. But what good is a challenge transcript with mediocre grades? So a kiddo taking an AP class and ending up with a B as opposed to taking an on-level class or an honors class. I'm thinking about our school environment, so excuse me. So thinking about an honors or an advanced class, right? That's opposed to an AP, and exceeding in that class, getting an A as opposed to a B in an AP class. That doesn't measure up to the level of challenge that was available to that student versus the success that they have had, right? So this is about a passion purpose transcript, right? Something that your kiddo loves to do is that deep dive. Something that your kiddo has is just one of those checks in the box as far as a graduation requirement. It might not be where you want to explore that deep dive. So this is an open conversation with your child about where their passions lie. This is an open conversation with the college counselors about where the deepest level of challenge lies for your kiddo, right? And this is about meeting both of those worlds in the same places and spaces.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I have been reminded that we are going to send out a poll. So we would really appreciate it if you would answer. It's only 4 questions, but it just really helps us know who's here, helps us know how to put these on in ways that serve you better. So please take the time to answer those 4 questions. We're going to keep going because I've got lots of other questions here. Also, keep putting questions in the Q&A if there's things that you're like, okay, but they haven't talked about this, and this is the question that I have. Okay, the next question that I've got here is, when do you recommend that kids start exploring colleges? So should we be trying to visit schools this summer? What if visiting isn't in our budget? How do I get my kid to start looking at schools and figuring out what might be a good fit for them?
Yeah, Natalie, it's very similar to how do you talk about the testing process. I think, letting the transition sit for where it is for the 9th grade year and the 9th grade summer, meaning the post 9th grade summer moving into 10th grade, is very appropriate. But if you have an eager beaver like myself, right, I was a student athlete who just wanted to see what was out there. It was not necessarily about enrolling, like thinking about the enrollment process or the application process. I think creating some summer trips the summer of 10th grade is more than appropriate, meaning the post 10th grade year going into 11th grade is more than appropriate. And then, of course, making sure that you capitalize off of that 11th grade summer and 11th grade year, because there's some gaps within, the breaks that we have, the natural breaks we have within the school year of 11th grade, definitely taking advantage of all that comes with that. But I would primarily say the rising junior year, end of sophomore year would be appropriate. But if you have an eager beaver who just wants to check some places out to get further enticed about what they have ahead of them, I take advantage of it, but on a small scale.
Awesome. All right. So what if we've got this question about my kids really only gotten involved in one activity? Is that going to be a problem when it comes time to apply for college? Should I be pushing them to branch out and join more things? Or is it okay if they're really focused on a single extracurricular?
That's a yes and. It's about balance, right? It's about where they spend their time. It's about reflecting on a kiddo's level of exhaustion or where they can best see themselves excelling, or where they are literally excelling, and you're able to give some tangible results towards that. You don't want to have complicating interests. That's one of the biggest things. As you asked that question, I had one kiddo pop into mind, and now they have found a level of balance with regards to their theatrical pursuits and their athletic pursuits. It's just a question of what season that they're going to play in and dedicate their time. So I think as we talk about the empowerment of choice, that's a level of conversation with your kiddo about, okay, where are we spending our time? Are we too spent? Are we able to dedicate our times to where our passions truly lie and do our best? That's the biggest thing. Where do we do our best?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from a parent who wants to know, how important is it? So they keep hearing a lot of talk about, well, if you want to get into a better college or a top college, you need a lot of APs. And they're like, well, how much weight do I give to that? And how do we balance that?
I might be the wrong person to answer this. And why I say that is because our school environment is very unique. And this isn't to talk about my resume, so I'll be very brief. Within the 17 years that I worked in independent school education, and I grew up in independent schools, I grew up in traditional ed and I worked in traditional educational environments up until the last 10 years, right? So let's say that's a divided amount of time as a profession. And within the school environment that I work in, we have a certain approach as it relates to APs, right? It truly is about that deep dive, right? Because your kiddo will be judged based upon that grade. It is so different than how it looks from a grade level performance, from getting an A, from getting a B. Like, I just really want to hit that home with you. And that's from a level of confidence for your kiddo, but that's also from a level of how their transcript is reflected. And I want to say one doesn't outpace the other. And I want to be very clear about that. So you want to have a level of balance as it relates to an AP. This is something that your kiddo is passionate about, that they would stay up hours for, even though they don't need to, just because it's something that they love to do. Where studying isn't a chore to them. It's something that they actually are salivating to get to at the end of the day. These are the courses that you want your kiddo involved in an AP. There's also various levels of advancement if we're talking about public schools, right? You have advanced courses, you have honors courses. So you want to evaluate the level of scaffolding that relates to these classes and the level of pace that relates to these classes and the level of passion that your kid has as it relates to these classes before you just think about how you build the transcript based upon what you have heard.
Yeah, we always tell kids, take the hardest classes that you can do well in, right? You don't want to load your schedule with a bunch of AP and honors classes. And then, like James said, get a lot of C's or not do very well in them. But you also don't want to take everything on level with the easiest, you sign up for all your extracurriculars, not because you have a passion for them, but because you hear that they're easy A's or whatever, and never challenge yourself. Schools are looking at both rigor and grades. So that you got to kind of take the hardest things that you can do well in. I don't know, James, does that jive with you? Okay, we're on the same page.
Oh, spot.
Great. All right. So I loved what you had to say about the dining room table. And I hope it's not so old fashioned because we do the same thing at our house. I will say, for parents who are, we did, I like your voice and choice, and you're right, teenagers need both. And for us, working in your room or where you choose to work is a privilege, right? And so if the work's not getting done or it's not getting done in time or whatever, then we can put you in a more public place. We've seen that work. And so I would just recommend that to parents who are maybe struggling for a new idea to try. What would you say, James? I know you mentioned, and I think the modeling of how we organize ourselves is great. What would you recommend to parents where, we are older than our teenagers and perhaps we organize ourselves in a different way than makes sense to them, these digital natives? How would you help a kid who's struggling to find an organizational method that works for them, but they look at yours and they look at your paper planner and they're like, no, that's not even going to try it?
You got to tap into their world, and I'll give an example of some teachers that I worked with, some ELA teachers, English and language arts teachers that I worked with in the past when emojis came about. They were wondering about annotating with emojis. Right. And so they worked with our 5th and 6th graders and partnered with them about, how to reflect what they saw as certain literature value with emojis that they would do as regular annotation, written annotation that they would do with emojis. And I know that that's a more playful way of looking at a level of organization, but I think, as I said before, it's tapping into their world. It's intrinsic motivation. One of the things as a middle school leader, educational leader, that I found is that intrinsic motivation is about 75% of the game as it relates to tapping into pre-adolescence and the things that they want to do, but you need them to get done. Right. And that doesn't always happen with a carrot and stick. Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen with a level of motivation that reaps a reward. That sometimes happens from some of the ingrained things that you can do to help to establish some healthy routines. So that's where truly that conversation is not just me pandering back to something that was said previously, but that's where a conversation around, okay, so what has that, and you've been through the middle school years, right? So it's talking about, okay, when we were working in science, we saw some things that really didn't work with that binding. As we thought about English, we saw some things that really had, right, gaining those traction points and then using those as leveraging points as you think about the level of systems of organizations for the future. So that'd be the biggest piece of advice for me.
Great. I think that's really helpful. All right. Well, what's a question that you wish parents had asked, like that you wish that parents of kids right now who are like just finishing up freshman year, about to head into sophomore year and beyond, what's something that you wish that they asked you?
Yeah. What are some ways to remain engaged and at the same time give them their own space? Because sometimes I think that parents, we all operate off of what we believe wasn't done in the way that we thought it should have been during our experience and try to do the opposite of what that was, right? And sometimes that's exactly right, and sometimes that's counterproductive, and sometimes it hits and it misses. You have folks who spend 160 plus days from 8 o'clock until 3 o'clock with your child. Thinking about, and as I talked about establishing those touch points, thinking about how you can tap into some of those things that you've heard from the school day, some of the things that they love, some of the things that they gravitate to, some of the things that they're struggling with. Those are the things that you really want to have the conversations about in carpool. Those are the things that you really want to, build the weekends around, as you think about rallying points. So that would be the biggest thing is don't hesitate to reach out to the folks who spend the majority of time with your kiddo within the school years, right? Because they have a great pulse. They should have a great pulse on what your kiddos experience and how they can partner with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think sometimes once our kids get out of elementary or middle school, you feel like there's a wall, right? Like, oh, I can't email my kid's teacher anymore.
And Natalie, I'll jump in, and it's not to be rude and interject,
Yeah.
but I thought the same thing. So I was in high schools for about 5 years in my early educational journey, then spent 11 years in middle schools, and came back to Galloway as a high school principal, not begrudgingly but cautiously optimistic, because I hadn't been in those environments before for many of the things that you're referencing, because that just is what I had noticed. But what I have found about our high school teachers is that they yearn for that connection, right? And if they don't have it with your kiddo, they're still putting eyes on your kiddo every day, right? So they might not have that intimate connection with your kid to be able to peel back every layer of the onion that you're looking for, but they're at least able to give you information about the day-to-day experience. So take advantage of that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that permission as parents of a high school student to be like, it's okay, I can email. James told me I could. Awesome. So we had somebody asked, again, I think a lot of us are thinking like, oh gosh, all we hear in the news is about how hard it is to get into college these days and how much it's getting more challenging, and the admission rates are down and blah, blah, blah. And so there's a lot of anxiety around that. I'm hoping that James and I can tamp down that anxiety tonight, because the truth is the majority of colleges admit the majority of students. When you read those news stories, it is about a select handful of universities. But someone has asked, like, how important is extracurriculars for college admissions? Like, do you have to be involved with many of them at school or outside of school? Does it matter? Yeah.
For me, it's been about telling the journey. It's about students being able to tell the journey about the why, right? Not just the what, the why. You can spend a ton of time in a whole bunch of different things, and I've seen this happen, and find that, Emory waitlist you and Dartmouth accepts you. There's situations where that happens, right? And it's not because of the totality of your profile, right? It's because of acceptance rates and because of how the dice have rolled with regards to those schools and what's happening in admissions. So it's about your journey and being able to articulate that. You're going to stand proud in front of your kiddos. Resume transcript is going to stand proud next to another kid. And like I said before, please know that your kiddo's journey is based upon your kiddo's school environment's journey, not who's across the street, not who's down the road, right? So if your kiddo has built a transcript that is strong in their level of achievement, strong in their level of appropriate challenge, right? And they can speak to the why as they sit across from admissions counselors, college admissions counselors, and they can speak to the why of these courses and the why of the extracurriculars that they're involved in. That's a solid profile. That sets them apart from a kiddo who cannot speak to the why, but just speaks to the what. I took this course because it was the next one to take, because my college counselor said that builds a great profile. Believe me, that does separate things when it comes to a deciding factor.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, this next question that we got is one around paying for college, and just do you have any resources or anything that you would recommend about like starting to look at scholarships? Or I mean, if even if you started when the kid was fresh out of the womb, there may still be a gap between what college costs now and what you've managed to get saved for it. And so do you have any resources that you would advise parents to look at or start to think about? I know it's a little early in the high school journey.
Yeah, the Hope Scholarship is something that is absolutely phenomenal and a benefit to all of those who are residents of Georgia, which I have found as somebody who has just recently moved to this state, is something that is sorry to be redundant, a huge benefit to those who are within the state. And here's the thing about me being novice to this region and about this city as well, is that I don't know all the extensive pathways for students to obtain different scholarships, but I do know, some of the tried and true of FAFSA and some of the financial assistance is there. There's also family and friends benefits. I'm actually filling out 2 recommendations tonight for kiddos who are applying to, or excuse me, who have been accepted into 2 institutions who have family and friends scholarships that extend from residents of Georgia who are attending these out-of-state schools. So that might be something that you think about as well. And Natalie, you might be aware of some other opportunities that I'm unfortunately unaware of just due to my novice nature of just being here.
Yeah, I know. And welcome to our state. So no, many states, not just Georgia, there's about 20 states across the US that have state funded programs that can help provide scholarships. One thing I would say is, so James is at an amazing independent school that really, is able to craft the bespoke high school journey of each of their students. My student is at a large public school where that isn't as possible. And something that I have found as a parent, and so I would offer to you all, is that you may need to be an advocate for your child around Hope or whatever your state program is specifically. So there are requirements. They have to have taken a certain number of years of English, certain math, right? Like certain foreign language requirements that may differ from the requirements just to graduate. And so be familiar with your state's requirements and make sure like, if we go back to the question about, well, what if my counselor isn't recommending things that I think my kid needs to take? Do be lining that up and making sure that your student will have what they need to qualify for those state programs by the time they graduate. Otherwise, it's going to be too late and you're going to be left like, what the heck? We could have gotten free in-state tuition and now we didn't. And it's because we're missing a year of foreign language. Like that's a bummer. Wish I would have known that earlier. So I would just, make sure that it's incumbent upon us as parents to kind of do the research on those and make sure that we're staying up to date on them. So, and then also just, there are lots of, just do a quick Google search, like Fast Web Scholar, like Go Mary. There's lots of scholarship compilation websites out there. There are more scholarship dollars that go unfunded every year than you would believe. And it's just because there's these tiny little scholarships that nobody applies for. And so every $1,000, every $1,500 can really add up. Not now, they don't want to hear from you now, but when your student is applying for school and is a senior, they should, I always tell people, like, let that be your student's part-time job. It's just applying for some of these smaller, lesser known scholarships, because so much of it just goes unclaimed because nobody actually applies. So throw your name in the hat. Don't think like, oh, I could never get it. They wouldn't pick me, or worse, like, oh, it's only $2,000. Like, if you get $2,000 and you get 10 of them, that's $20,000. That's a very good part-time job as a high school student. So that's what I would say along paying for school.
And that's an established routine right there in the summertime.
There you go. There you go. We have a couple more questions. I want to make sure we get through our last couple of slides. So I'm going to do those first, and then we'll go to our last couple of questions. And then we'll let everybody get out of here. So because we so appreciate your time tonight. Let me get back to my slideshow. All right. Just wanted to make sure everybody knows we have an upcoming webinar on May 18th. This one is really for parents and educators and anyone who supports kids or teens or tweens in any way, because it's during the day. So it's 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific, although we always will send you the recording if you can't attend live. But this one is about supporting teens and tweens and mental health. And it's got a behavioral therapist on it, along with parents of students who've had some mental health challenges and other things. So it's going to be a great panel. So we'll just recommend anyone who supports teens to go along with that. And then if you're looking for writing curriculum in particular this summer, I know this is something that I'm doing with my teen, is we've got a writing workshop, 5-part writing curriculum, working one-on-one with someone. I know a lot of kids these days, let's just say that they're used to writing at 140 characters or less, and not necessarily whole words. And so getting some extra practice with writing is helpful. All right, so then with a couple of questions left, James, and then we'll let everybody get it back to their evenings. This has been so helpful, so thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are not necessarily quite as college focused, a couple of them, but I think, in talking about kids of this age, you have lots of wisdom to share. And this next one is really around phones and safety, and how do we make sure our kids are being safe with their technology? And it does bleed over into college. Parents, many of you may not realize, but every year there are a certain number of students who get their fancy acceptances, think that they're all ready, feel excited to go, and then those get rescinded based on something that student had posted online. So, James.
Yeah, that just hit home in so many different ways, because I'm thinking back to when the first occurrence of something that happened with a phone impacted some of my students. And it was actually an 8th and 9th grade transition. And this is back in 2000 and at least 9. And it was something that impacted their student athletes. I can speak directly to it, and they couldn't participate for their first month as student athletes or as students coming into 9th grade. And that was 2009. So you can only imagine how things are nowadays with regards to social media screenshots. What's there lives, and it is my hope that every student is having that level of conversation, or if not that level of education within school or within the home environment. That is something that families have to take as priority. It's a complete difference from when we were in school, y'all. Everything is viewable, everything is recordable, and then it becomes historic, which is the scariest thing that's out there. So it's not only the implications of being viewed, it's also who's behind the camera as well, just as culpable, just as accountable. With regards to things such as that, and what is typed and what is put out there in the digital media. It's cement, it's not quicksand. Kiddos need to know that, and that needs to be an open dialogue at home. A lot of kids like to touch the fire a couple times to realize that it's hot. This is one that they cannot. This is one that as soon as they touch it, it's something that has immediate repercussions.
Thanks. So yeah, just the open conversation. I think that's wise. Something that we started doing after talking to other parents is all technology gets turned in at 10 and charges in our room overnight, and we've got access to it and all the passwords. And it's unfortunate that we have to think about these things, but like you said, it's cement, not quicksand. It's crazy. All right. What do you do with a teenager who you ask them what happened at school? You ask them about their day and all you get is nothing. It was fine.
And so Michael Gurian is a phenomenal author that talks about the science of how boys and girls learn differently and also about how to engage with boys and girls. I actually have had a chance to sit down with him, have dinner with him, and really pick his brain, not just from a literary standpoint, but truly about the science behind the information that he shares. And I'll give you this. So with boys, one of the things that he talked about is that, the eye-to-eye, face-to-face contact is not one that's ever going to divulge information for pre-adolescents or adolescents. Having them engaged in an activity and having casual conversation is something that will get you more information than you ever got before. I worked for an all-boys school as a dean of students, ninth grade dean of students. And instead of talking to my kiddos in my office, I would go outside, toss a ball. It was a lacrosse school, then, a student athlete school. So whether it was tossing the ball with a lacrosse stick, throwing the football, whether it was tossing the baseball, next thing you know, kiddos are telling me their whole life story as we just engage in just a little bit of just just engaging with playing and talking, and even walking and talking. Something that my mother did with me that is still something that is I've given families for years, so it's not, I'm just talking about, when I was a child, is also the ability to write a letter, type a letter, text something. There are times where kiddos cannot express something verbally. So giving them the option to be able to write something out to you and that it would be met without judgment, but it would be met with conversation, and being true to that, no matter how rough the information is that you receive, is something that is extremely valuable and has reaped huge results for many of the families that I've extended that information to. And then carpool always, right? Being a listening ear, but not being a talking voice, right? Just putting that ear to the ground and then following up later in those moments where you're not digging for information, but you have an opportunity to follow up appropriately, not just on the gossip that was heard, but on something that might have struck a nerve. That is something that you want to make sure you touch point on.
Awesome. Those are great. Thank you. All right. Well, then I want to leave us with something positive, and which, how do you help kids dream and like dream big, right? For their lives, not just like small, simple, I want to go to college or I want to, but like, how do you help them dream for themselves?
It's a question. Oh, this is going to be horrible because I'm going to give up a question that I asked for all of my prospective employees because I absolutely love it. What brings you joy? Right. That's the key component. It's what I ask even our prospective applicants, right? I don't ask them, what's your academic focus? What's gonna no, where's your passion? What do you love to do? If you had the day to yourself, would it be something that you would love to do that nobody would think that you would want to do? Right. That's where some of those unhinged moments or unlocking Pandora's box for a pre-adolescent or adolescent comes from. What brings you joy? What's going to put that smile on your face, like when you're on the playground in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, when that ball was rolled out? Because you don't want to lose that. And that's something that, as adults in the hustle and bustle of life, that we tend to lose. So you don't want your kiddo to forget about that in the grind of high school.
Awesome. Well, thank you, James. Presenting with you always gives me joy. You're just such a wealth of knowledge and a light. So thank you for offering your time tonight. I hope it's been helpful to our webinar participants, and we will see you all later. Bye.